So first and foremost, let me just say happy Monday to everybody. This is like, it's Monday, folks. This is a big day because this week we are going to begin talking about actual schedules for reopening school. And I know there's going to be a lot of energy around this topic. So I just can't wait to get into some of these Zooms to hear some of the discourse that I know is going to happen around this. And one thing I think is going to be important for us today is to revisit our norms, right? To remember how we're going to be able to conduct our sessions and our meetings and our discussions. So let's make sure we revisit our norms. And then also we want to make sure that everybody is going in today with an open mind, right? I've said this last week, there is no way for us to replicate how our traditional school openings happen, right? That is just not going to be possible because we now have social distancing and social gathering guidelines. And in order to adhere to those guidelines, it is literally impossible for us to have everybody back in school all at one time. So we need to just take that like in our heads and just like remove it out because it's not going to be possible. I'm going to keep saying it to our community too. Like everybody's, on this whole thing of why can't 100% go back, including our U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. I tweeted out to her today, please call me. I will help you navigate this system because what you were telling us to do is just not possible and you need some help, lady. So, I mean, she is just too much. The president, they're all confusing everybody. And it's bigger than what kids, it's bigger than the safety of our kids. We have adults in our schools too. Schools are not run with just children sitting in school, right? There are adults in the school too. And we have to make sure that we are making decisions that are going to provide a safe environment for all of our staff members as well. And students also go home to adults who might have compromised immune systems in health conditions that they could be a carrier of COVID-19. And then they are actually going home and infecting, their household. So I think it's so important for us, to make sure, and I sent this out to our leaders just recently, we have to make sure that we're advocating and not allowing people to speak on our behalf. So I'm being very adamant about the U.S. Secretary of Education and our president, because I just, totally disagree with the decisions and the information that they're putting out there. And even with the American Academy of Pediatrics, there's a report that says, all students need to be back in school. I think that, of course, research shows that all kids should be in school. I mean, we wouldn't all have jobs right now, right? So I know research out there that says kids should be in school. So I validate that. However, during a pandemic and during a situation where we have COVID-19 that's running rampant all over our world, it is a very different situation. And you sometimes have to set aside the educational research and begin to talk to our medical and health professionals around what is right. That is when we step out, out of that lane for a second and we allow the health professionals and experts to guide our thinking. And that is what I hope that you all will be doing this week. So I'm going to get off my soapbox. I just wanted to get that out there because I know this is recorded. So I want the world to know what Dr. Hutchings thinks about that information that's out there. So now it's, set in stone out of my mouth to everybody's ears. So I want to turn things over to Dr. Mozingo to make sure that, she's setting the stage for us. I said this last Friday. We had a very successful meeting last week with the board this past Friday. I just want to commend all of our chairs for representing you all very well. I really appreciate the hard work that Dr. Mozingo has been doing, our chairs have been doing, education elements. You all are like phenomenal. You are helping us to really facilitate this work and this discussion. You're pushing our thinking. You're helping us to remain focused and organized. And without you, I don't even know if this would be as smooth as it has been at such a rapid pace. One other thing I think that is so important before I turn things over to Dr. Mozingo is just to mention that, everybody unfortunately can't be a part of our planning teams, and I know everybody in the world wants to be, right? I hope that you all will talk with your stakeholders and share your experiences throughout this process. We need our staff members, to understand we don't have a plan in place. If we had a plan, I would not be wasting my time on this call or your time. So you need to make sure we let everybody know we don't have a plan, and that is intentional. We are not like Fairfax. We are not like Loudoun. We are not Arlington. We are not Falls Church. We are not any other school division. We're Alexandria City Public Schools. And in order for us to develop our plan, we're doing this outreach and having these multiple channels of communication throughout this process. So the survey is not the only way for a parent to give information. I've been forwarding emails over the weekend to Dr. Mozingo and different chairs, depending on the comments that are coming out of the email, just so that they can share it with our planning teams for, information for you all to consider. Not to say that you have to do it, but information for you all to consider. Next week, we're going to start our community conversations, and that's going to be an opportunity to really have some engagement with our community, as well. So I just need you all to talk to your constituency groups and your colleagues and your friends and your family around this work and how we're being methodical with this. And there's nothing that's set in stone. If there were, we would be the biggest liars in the world and be wasting everybody's time by meeting like this, right? Why would we set this up if we had a plan? So I just need people to understand that that is just not even possible and not even a part of how we operate. And I want us to get out of this mindset of ACPS holding or hoarding information. We're out of that now. Let's get past it. This is a new day. We got a new plan that we've adopted. We're talking about changing the name of TC Williams. If people don't see it's a new day in town, then I don't know where they are. They're not on this planet, because this is a brand new day. And I hope that the adoption of the strategic plan and the efforts that we're doing, including this work, is showing people that we are on a mission to make sure that we are dismantling the racial inequities in Alexandria City Public Schools, and that we're going to continue to be transparent as we move forward, including with this 4.0. All right, so I'm sorry I got long-winded, Dr. Mozingo. I'm going to turn things over to you, and I'm going to close my mouth so I can go and see all the wonderful work that everybody else is doing.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hutchins, and good morning, everyone. Again, I'd like to just today welcome you to our third cross-functional planning team meeting. This is our third meeting with the group, and we really appreciate all the thinking, the processing, everything that's occurring today. I want to also welcome, I know that we have some new individuals that have joined our teams, and will continue the teams will probably continue to grow, but a special shout out to some of our teachers that have joined the cross-functional teams today. Also, in terms of communication, we will provide all of you at the end of around 11 or 11:30, we'll provide you a link to the presentation on Friday, as well as the 4.0 reopening well page. As he indicated, we are committed to making sure that you have information at your fingertips. In addition to that, I will turn this over to Natalie Hall, who works with Education Elements with SEMA. But we're really excited about today and this week, because it will be a focus on scheduling, and that's the heart of the next decision in terms of what needs to occur. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Natalie. And again, thank you for your commitment and your ideas around reimagining the schooling process for children here in Alexandria.
Thank you, Dr. Mozingo and Dr. Hutchings. And good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Natalie Hall. I'm a consultant with Education Elements. Feel really honored and grateful to be joining you in this process this morning. And I'm also, as mentioned, joined by my wonderful colleagues, Sima Reingold and Christina Strunk. You will hear from them later throughout this presentation. They're going to be sharing a little bit about the overall design process, and are also going to give you a lot of information about what we'll be digging into today. So with that, I wanted to start everyone off with a check-in question. We really want to make sure that we're hearing everybody's voices across teams and within teams today, and a check-in question is a great way to begin that process. So in the chat, would love for everyone to add their response to this question of, where are you today? Are you in your head, so you have a lot on your mind? Are you in your hands? You really want to be strategic and tactical and get things done? Or are you in your heart and feeling a lot of emotions as you go into this conversation about master scheduling? And maybe you're all three, but would love to hear some responses in the chat here. All three, head always, head and heart. Okay, a lot of people in their head this morning. I think I'm in my head as well, full disclosure. And this is great. Thank you everyone for checking in. For the sake of time, I'm gonna move us forward, but continue to utilize the chat. If you have any questions, you can message us privately if there's something with the facilitation that you want us to go back on, but we want this to be very much an open dialogue. So thank you all for checking in. A few other things about Zoom logistics. First, please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. This is a really large group. So if we're all making sure that we're on mute, that'll minimize feedback that we're getting. If you feel comfortable to do so, we'd love to see your face during this process. Again, use the chat if you have questions or points that you want to raise throughout the conversations. And then of course, we'd love for you to remain engaged and really focused throughout this conversation as well. Another quick thing I want to touch on before we turn it over to Dr. Hart and Ms. Gulick to talk about transportation capacity and facilities is our norms for collaboration. This is, as both Dr. Mozingo and Hutchings mentioned, a really complicated process, a process that brings about a lot of emotions and a lot of uncertainties. So wanted to flash some of our norms here on the screen so you can get a sense of where we're coming to the table. As we work together, we're striving for psychological safety, so making sure that people feel comfortable to share what's on their head, hearts, or in their hands this morning. We also want to emphasize preparedness, dependability, timeliness, and then of course throughout this process, make sure that we are creating structure and clarity throughout. So with that, as mentioned, I'm going to pass the torch, so we can spend a little time getting some updates about our facility and transportation capacity.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Natalie. Good morning, all. And as Natalie alluded to, myself and Ms. Erica Gulick, we are going to go over some initial data points when it comes to our facility capacity and our transportation capacity. So not to belabor the point, I'm going to ask Ms. Gulick to start with the first slide as she reviews facility capacity.
Good morning, everybody. And for those of you who watched the board meeting on Friday, you may have seen this. And I know my group went over some of this on Wednesday, the capital and facilities team. But just going over some of the assumptions we use to, at this stage of the planning process, get an idea of how many students we can safely fit in buildings, in classrooms, at a safe distance for both our staff and our students. So thinking about some of those assumptions, our goal is to aim to maintain 6 feet distance at all times. So this is not only in the classroom, but also in the hallway. What does it change about arrival and dismissal procedures? Maybe there's one-way hallways, one-way exits and entrances. So those are some of the things we have to think about. In going forward, we've used a 65 square foot per person factor. So that's per person, not per student. So for everybody in a classroom, that's what we're thinking is a safe number that provides enough contingency for different changes in certain room configuration or other needs that that are unique to each school for all people. So, and just certain points about that, you may have seen some of the diagrams from Fairfax County. We're kind of taking a position that people are not discrete points, so you actually need square footage for yourself. Some of us need more than others, but thinking about how much space you need as a person, and maybe that's about 4 square feet, and then you need 6 feet away from you in either your north and south direction, your north and east, whatever it may be. That some of the classroom setups that we know we have some old schools with a lot of built-in shelving that will take up space in classrooms. And then thinking about that walls that are floor to ceiling will count as separators. We know this is airborne and tends to stay in the air longer within facilities. So just thinking about how that may impact. We looked at, for the next chart, this is just going into more of the math of what we use, but we use 1 teacher per classroom, including at kindergarten and pre-K. So we know we have paraprofessionals typically in those rooms. So maybe they're somewhere else with other students at that time, but just for the sake of estimating the amount of students we could fit, we did a adult per classroom, using all current classroom spaces and not others at this time. While we could move, we may decide in the scheduling conversation, we need to fit more students. And so we need to use our gyms and our cafeterias for instruction. And just knowing that adding more spaces adds more staff. And so it becomes kind of a budget question then too. Desks and furniture facing the same direction, that doesn't necessarily have to happen, but it's just kind of an assumption for right now. You could do a circle. We've seen iterations where it's a U, a triangle, so there are different ways we could do it. And then in thinking about containing the virus and limiting outbreaks, as well as ensuring social distance, that classroom transitions during the school day should be eliminated or limited as much as possible. So when we think about a secondary structure where we know students are changing every period or block, what is the impact that that could have on instruction? So we could go to the next slide, which is the capacity chart. Okay, here it is. So starting from left to right. So on the left, we have all of our facilities. We have, the facilities team has a database of all of our spaces and the square footage for all of them, give or take a few. There are some errors, so just acknowledging that there's room for error here. The first column after the schools is the sum of the social distance capacity. So that's how many students can we fit if we have 65 square feet per student in every one of our classroom spaces. And then you can go down the list. We did another iteration at the time, the first time we ran this, just seeing what if we tried to restrict to no more than 10 people in one classroom space. At the start of COVID, that's some of what we were doing with some of our contractors and facilities. So just thinking about how that could impact our capacity as well. In the third and fourth columns is where we're doing the analysis of if we decide to keep the transitions that we currently have at the secondary level, changing for every period, or keeping the A and B day at our high school, and the block scheduling, what does that impact to capacity? Because when you do that, you do need more flexibility and it will impact your capacity. So you can see for Hammond at social distance capacity, we maybe could fit 852 students. But when we apply their regular schedule to that, it's only about 682 students. And then moving further along, their current capacity is what we have currently measured the buildings to be compared to our ed spec for each grade level. The projection is what the amount of students we're projecting to have next year. This is based on pre-COVID projection analysis, so just bear that in mind. I see Jane's question popping up. John Adams does include Early Childhood Center. I apologize. It's all part of the same database right now. I will separate it out in the future. The percent, and then the percent capacity of projection is related to how many, based on the amount of social distance capacity, what percent of the projected amount of students that we have do we think we're going to fit? And so if you look at that, and you'll see George Washington is highlighted because it's George Washington. Some of our facilities are very old and have very small classrooms, like George Washington, like Lyles Crouch, like George Mason, Matthew Morey. And so the more overcrowded they are, like George Washington, you could see is projected to have 1,644 students and has a capacity for 1,150 students. All of those constraints put on that building leave us with only being able to achieve 36% of the projected student body at a social distance, at a safe social distance in the classroom. So we just do this to acknowledge that every school is a little bit different. And so when we look at schedules and we look at what spaces we're using, we will have to acknowledge that it may be different school by school, but that in general, in total, we do project that we can fit 50% or more of our total student body throughout our schools, but not necessarily school by school. So that's all I have. I know it's a lot. Feel free to email me any questions. I'll turn it back to Alicia.
Erica, I see that there's 2 quick questions for clarification in the chat. So is the capacity the total number of people or just the total number of students?
That is the total number of students. We factored out 1 teacher per classroom in that number.
And Ms. Peters asked, is this on a single day, so the capacity per day?
Correct, at one time.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so I will start discussing the capacity assumptions for transportation. And having this conversation, I think it's important for everyone to see what our typical buses are able to handle in terms of capacity and how the different social distancing models impact that number. So within our fleet, we have 30 passenger, 53, 65, and 77 passenger buses. The normal capacity is in the first column. If we do the model of 1 student per bench, you see that those numbers drastically reduce in terms of the capacity that we can carry. And then if we move to the 1 student per bench in alternating rows, it further reduces our ability to transport students, or the number of students that we can transport at any given time and day. The following slides will give a little bit more information specifically about what those numbers look like. So the assumptions that we use when making the transportation models is that we have 10,000 students within the division that are qualified to ride the bus. However, approximately 65 students actually participate in ridership. Our fleet utilization, we currently have 123 buses total in our fleet. Again, the various sizes that were mentioned before. If we use all of these buses, it leaves us no contingency. For instance, if a bus breaks down, we wouldn't have a replacement bus to be able to pick those students up and to take them to school if we're using all of the buses in our fleet. Based off of the different sizes of our buses, we could have a number of transportation scenarios, so just please keep that in mind. We currently run about 102 routes, 2 runs, and we are anticipating that we would keep the same number of routes, but our runs would increase. And we are defining siblings at this point as children who live in the same residence regardless of their familial relation. And they would be allowed to sit together as well. Next slide. So this slide just gives you an example of the 2 models specifically that we are speaking of. And this is in reference to a 77 passenger bus. So with 77 passenger buses, you can typically sit 2 to 3 to a seat. If we go to the 1 student per bench model, which is the model that is highlighted in green, you will see that that is literally just 1 student per bench. And you see what that would look like. If we move to a 1 student per bench alternating row model, which is highlighted in the red, you see how, again, that capacity is even further reduced. However, using this model will increase the distance between students. So right now within the transportation industry, specifically when it comes to school divisions, this is the model that most are leaning towards. Next slide, please. And so I'm sorry if it's a little blurry, but I want to give 2 quick capacity scenarios in regards to what our transportation plan could possibly look like. So in the first scenario, it would be utilizing 90 of our buses. And the reason why we selected 90 buses is because given our ridership hovering about 6,500 people, students, we could transport that number of students using 90 buses, which of course would leave a good portion of our buses for contingency. If we use the 1 student per bench model, we go from being able to transport 6,500 students to 1,934. And if we go to the 1 student per bench alternating model, that number drops even more to 971 students. So that's a capacity change respectively of 70% and 85%. If we were to utilize a scenario where all of our buses were used, leaving us with no contingency, that does increase our ability to transport more students. So if we went to the 1 student per bench model, that's 2,726 students that we could transport. And if we move to a 1 student per bench alternating model, that increases our ability to transport 1,367 students. Again, a capacity change of 70% and 85% respectively. So we wanted to share this information because our transportation is going to be key in terms of the models and the schedules that we develop. Wanting everybody to see right now, based off the assumptions that we are currently using, how much our capacity has been impacted by whatever social distancing models we will put in place on the buses. With that, I will turn it back over to Sima or Natalie.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. I see some questions in the chat. I see that there is a question from Dana Chambers. Is our transportation planning still making the assumption that MacArthur Taney students will be encouraged to do 100% bus ridership, or will that expectation change?
I will ask Erica Gulick to chime in on that.
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, there is a question in the chat from Dana Chambers saying, is our transportation planning still making the assumption that MacArthur at Taney students will be encouraged to do 100% bus ridership, or will that expectation change?
No, so that expectation will change, and we never really thought we would achieve 100% bus ridership. So the site is built to accommodate if all the students decide to drive to school. So it will have to be a new communication because we did push for people to get on the bus, but we will be able to accommodate it with parents driving.
Okay, I see there's another question about capacity to do midday runs for students with disabilities. Has that been considered yet?
We do have representatives from special education on the team that is health and safety, which does encompass transportation. So as we further develop these assumptions, again, this is our first go around with these numbers, we will make sure that we are building in those considerations for our special education population.
Thank you. I'm trying to see, Dr. Hutchings asked how many bus drivers do we have?
I'm going to ask Kafaya Hamad to speak to that. I just want to make sure I'm giving accurate information because I do know we have a few vacancies. So Kafaya, are you on the line?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. At the moment, we have 102 drivers that can actually do a run.
Thank you, Kafaya.
And that includes our spare drivers.
And I see that there are a few questions in the chat about our DASH partnership. Yes, that is something that we are exploring. We do not have those final details yet, but as those become available, I will make sure to share with the group.
Okay. There was another question in the chat about social distancing at the bus stop.
Great question. That is one of the considerations and decisions that the group, the health and safety group, will have to, provide recommendations for. In all honesty, it will probably be difficult to encourage social distancing at bus stops unless there are adults present, particularly for our younger students. So that is something that we will have to work through as well as part of our planning.
Okay. Sima, I'm going to pass it over to you. I think those are most of the questions that we see here in the chat.
Thank you so much, Erica and Dr. Hart. One of the important parts of spending some time talking about capacity, well, I'll turn my video on. One of the important parts about spending some time doing capacity is that we are able to understand what are some of the bounds for planning when it comes to schedules. And schedules is going to be the major conversation for this week. And so now, if you don't mind moving forward to the next slide, we can share. So before we get started to discuss the work for this week, wanted to make sure we're all on the same page with common language. So models, we're going to be discussing today different models. So there is the traditional model, the hybrid model, and the virtual model. As shared out with parents and shared with the board this past week, we will be focusing on two of those, the hybrid model and the virtual model. The second term to get a foundation with is sprint. We use the term sprint to describe a 2-week planning cycle where we focus in on a certain subset of activities and actions. And we will have materials both within the sprint and at the end of the sprint to share out with the community, to share with the board, etc. The third area is core areas, and each of the cross-functional planning teams has a subset of core areas. We will be dividing when we prepare final materials and we prepare a reopening plan for out in the community. Each core area will have a responsibility and we'll have a section to that. So you'll be able to have an area where you are providing guidance and providing recommendations out to other stakeholders. And then the last word is one that is not used that often in education, which is prototype. And prototype is either a verb or a noun. And it is a process. We'll use it as a process of generating new solutions that we have never seen before. And it's meant to be a draft of something that we can review as a team. So we can start getting our design juices flowing, we create a prototype, and then we provide feedback on that prototype. So prototypes are never intended to be final products, but they're intended to be something that we're all able, that's a little bit more than just words, that we're able to see it, feel it, think it, understand more about it, and provide guidance, feedback, and growth in our ideas. So we're doing sprints. We're currently in our second sprint. So the next slide goes through each of the sprints and the purpose of this one. So you'll notice, thank you, Nat, for advancing. You'll notice that we started with the first sprint and we are currently in the middle of the second sprint. The purpose of the sprint is to look deeper at different scheduling options and starting to understand master schedules at different schools and instructional models across different departments and different grade levels. We're digging into the budget analysis. So we started preparing, we pulled out, and we asked each of the teams last week to identify areas that they might have increased or decreased budgets. We're prioritizing certain policies and processes as we know things are going to need to shift and change, and we're drafting action plans and prototypes, that same term from before. So we're moving forward. There's going to be stuff in sprint 3 and sprint 4, but right now we're focused on sprint 2. So last week we got a big check mark in the cross-functional planning team. Thank you everyone for joining in and being involved in the conversation. This week we are evaluating scheduling options, and soon I'm going to hand this over to Christina on my team to go through the scheduling options, and we're going to be designing those prototypes. And then starting on Wednesday, I know that folks are very interested in an empathy activity where we dig into the staff and the survey data to help us really understand. We understand constraints from the perspective of facilities and from buses, from Dr. Hart and that group, and then we will also understand more about constraints and preferences from our students and from our staff. So to give you guys a quick visual as to what we're building towards, we're going to be creating schedules that highlight at the day level, what is the guidance, what is it that that is going to happen in that model across every single day. We will also be providing guidance at a weekly level. What is it a week in the life of a student or a week in the life of a staff member? What does that model look like? We will also organize across synchronous and asynchronous learning, which Christina will go into a bit deeper of details, but we will need to define what does synchronous learning mean at ACPS? What is asynchronous? How do we can have synchronous learning both in person and virtual. We can have asynchronous learning in both in person and virtual. However, because in-person time is so limited, we are noticing that most districts are choosing to only have asynchronous time outside of buildings. And then if you're not part of the SEAL team, there is still sections that you're going to be building out of this next deliverable. So this is an example out of transportation, and you can see that there's an area here of what we heard, and that would be where we would add in information about what we would hear out of the surveys or out of conversations with other stakeholders. You're providing guidelines and guidance out to the community. There's also district guidance and campus action items and alignment with different other documents that would provide additional support and maybe additional guidance from other divisions or from the CDC or from Virginia Department of Health. And so a summary like this, and this is a sample with another district we work with, Klein ISD in Texas, but a sample like this is to show that the work that you're putting together today in the workbooks and on Wednesday will be used to create an external facing deliverable. And if there are any questions on this, feel free to ask during, feel free to ping me, feel free to ask during your breakout groups. We will get the questions back to us. And over the next 2 days, we will be building out the template with the communications team of what this reopening plan will look like.
All right, thanks Sima for setting that up. Again, my name is Christina Strunk and I'm a consultant at Education Elements. As Clint said in the chat, I feel like I'm also in my feet. I'm really excited to walk this journey with you all today. So thank you for welcoming us to your community. Want to just go in and share a little bit about the way that we're going to think about scheduling today and then over the course of the week. Like Dr. Mazingo said, scheduling is really at the heart of what we're going to do today. And we want to make sure that we're building and understanding together as a group of what are all of the different ideas that are out there right now. We want to make sure that we're working smarter, not harder. We're not recreating the wheel, but rather taking innovative ideas and things that work from other districts and letting them spark ideas for what's going to work at ACPS. So what we're going to do today, and some of you have already jumped into the document, but we will take some ideas from different districts, from neighboring states, and we'll explore those ideas to then come up with some models for ACPS that we're going to use to test out with all of those different capacities. So we're going to build kind of the frame of our schedules in a hybrid model and 100% distance learning model. Then we're going to test those out with all of the different factors and the new data. Like Dr. Hutchings said in this morning's opening, that we want to make sure that we're really building this plan with community input. We know that there are a lot of engagement activities that are going to be ongoing, and we don't want to just create a schedule or a frame that we think works on paper, but that is actually living and breathing and works for the community that we're planning for. So Natalie, if you jump into the next slide. What we want to consider when we're looking at schedules, and this is something that if you're on the SEAL team, you're going to dive deeper into this because this is really at the heart of your work. We want to think about what are the days where students are attending. So we're thinking about in-person attendance. We're also thinking about when they're attending, in what order. You might see this in some of the schedules that you're going to look through. You want to think about who is attending. So you might want to start by prioritizing students in special groups, whether that is students with disabilities or English language learners. You might think about a phased approach with entire grades or some grades. Again, like Sima had brought up, thinking about synchronous or asynchronous time. We want to really set up with this group the constraints at the district level that's going to then free school leaders to go in and add in details that work specifically for their communities. So what we don't want to do is design a schedule that is so incredibly detailed and constrained that school leaders don't have the flexibility to make sure they're adapting for their individual community. But we want to make sure that at the district we're setting up that frame that is really important to guide the work forward. So again, you see the visual on the left. But what we're going to try and do today is really think about what are a couple of examples at the elementary and the secondary level, knowing that those are two very different contexts for both hybrid models and virtual models across all of these different considerations. We'll walk through a protocol if you're part of that smaller team, but the rest of you are going to be really thinking about what are the implications on the schedule for your particular group and expertise area. We want to also make sure that we're testing these models and prototypes that we're building across the week and throughout this sprint across our guiding principles. If we're not making sure that we're including the voices of parents, families, and students, we're not going to get the whole picture. If we're not communicating clearly, this plan is going to just live on paper. So we really want to make sure that we're coming back to these guiding principles as we're creating our models. So I want to just walk you through the protocol. In your small groups, you're going to be in groups of 4 to 5. We think that having a smaller group to have these initial discussions of what's coming up for you as you're looking at these schedules is really helpful. So you're going to be in random groups. You might be with someone new, so you might want to begin with some introductions. And there's a variety of roles and expertise areas here. But we're going to start by exploring the crosswalk document. That document shows you a comparison and some high-level trends of what districts in Northern Virginia are doing and in sister states. And we want to think about not only what are they doing, but what might we do in response. The next resource that you're going to go through are the anchor schedules. So that's in that slide deck. That just provides a visual of some sample schedules that are coming out of different districts. If you look in the notes for each of those slides, you'll see whatever resource it was pulled from linked. Oftentimes in the return to school plans, they're really specific language. So it might be helpful, especially if you're coming from a different planning team with transportation, to explore some of those resources to see what's coming up for you there. The last piece that we're going to do is in our small groups, we're going to just post on Padlet. If you haven't used it before, it's basically like an online sticky note board where you can add just your ideas of what's coming up for you. Maybe there's an idea that you think is really exciting or interesting, any questions that come up, and then what might you consider adding, what's missing from some of these schedules to get to those guiding principles. The slides are in the chat that Sima just added. I would recommend having this slide open so that you have all of the resources in your small group. Again, we're going to spend about half an hour here, and then we're going to break into our planning teams. Anything else, Sima or Natalie, you want to add?
I was going to say, I think we're going to do about 25 minutes because of the time that we're in. So we'll do 25 minutes. And if you don't get through the Padlet, that's also okay, because in your cross-functional planning team, you will also have a reflection protocol. So I would prioritize the crosswalk document and going through the different slides and having that conversation, and then open up the Padlet, look at the questions in there, but we understand if you don't have a comprehensive response in the Padlet, because there is another reflection later.
And just to ground us in why we're doing this first before actually creating our schedule models, is that we think it's really important to get some overall guidance, and then we'll go ahead and dive into more of the specifics. But want to make sure that everyone is speaking the same language, looking and seeing what are other districts doing so that we can then build our plans. Great. And with that, you should be getting an invitation to join a breakout room soon. If there are any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or send an email to us, and we'll talk soon.